The first time Daniel walked into Meridian Capital, nobody looked up. That was nothing new. Daniel was the kind of man people looked past. He wore the same gray jacket almost every day. His shoes were clean but old. His hair was always neatly combed, but the gray at his temples made him look tired even when he wasn't. He carried a worn leather bag over his shoulder that had seen better decades. He stepped into the marble lobby and paused for a moment. The building was enormous, glass walls, high ceilings, the kind of place that was designed to make you feel small on purpose. Somewhere above him, 34 floors of people were busy making decisions worth millions of dollars. Daniel already knew that. He had designed it that way. He walked to the reception desk and waited patiently. The young receptionist was typing something and didn't look up for a full minute. When she finally did, her eyes moved over him the way people's eyes move over furniture. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I have a meeting on the 34th floor," Daniel said. She looked at her screen. Then back at him. Then typed something slowly, as if she wasn't quite sure he was in the right building. "Your name?" "Daniel Mercer," he said simply. She paused. Just for a second. Then typed again without another word. Daniel had not always been quiet. 22 years ago, he was the loudest person in any room. He was the one with big ideas and even bigger dreams. At 30 years old, he had borrowed money from 3 different people, including his father-in-law, and started a small financial consulting firm out of a 2-room office above a laundromat. His wife, Clara, believed in him before anyone else did. She packed his lunch every morning and worked part-time at a pharmacy in the evening so they could pay rent while Daniel built something from nothing. It was hard. There were months when they ate simple meals and turned the heat down to save money. There were nights Daniel sat at the kitchen table with papers spread everywhere, staring at numbers that didn't yet add up. Clara would bring him tea, sit beside him, and say the same thing every time. "You're not finished yet," she would say. "You're just not finished yet." He held on to those words like a rope. 10 years after that tiny 2-room office, Meridian Capital was one of the fastest-growing financial firms on the East Coast. Daniel had built it carefully, honestly, and quietly. He never put his face on anything. He never gave interviews. He stayed in the background while good people he trusted ran the day-to-day. Most people inside the company had never even seen him. Clara got sick 7 years ago. It happened quickly, the way those things sometimes do. One month she was laughing at the kitchen table. The next month she was in the hospital. Daniel spent those months by her side. He left the firm in the hands of his board of directors, signed the necessary documents to give them operational authority, and sat in a hospital room holding his wife's hand. Clara passed on a quiet Thursday morning in October. Daniel buried her in the town where she grew up, next to a row of oak trees she had always loved. He stood at the grave for a long time after everyone else had gone. He didn't cry in front of people. He never did. When he came back to the world, something in him had shifted. He returned to Meridian Capital for a few months, but found he couldn't sit in that office without thinking about the years he had spent chasing success instead of sitting beside the woman who made it all possible. So he stepped back. Not away, but back. He kept his ownership. He kept his shares. He stayed connected through his attorney, Eleanor, who handled everything with absolute precision. But he let the day-to-day world go on without him. He moved into a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. He cooked simple meals. He read books. He visited Clara's grave every Sunday. And little by little, the people inside Meridian Capital forgot that Daniel Mercer existed. The trouble began the way most trouble does, slowly, and then all at once. Daniel had been receiving reports from Eleanor for months. The board had changed. New executives had come in, ambitious ones, the kind who cared more about their own positions than about the company's foundation. His old board members had retired or moved on. The faces were different now. Richard Holt had been appointed as acting CEO 2 years ago. He was polished and confident and very good at appearing capable. He restructured departments. He rebranded internal processes. He gave himself and 3 other senior executives significant salary increases. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man who owned the controlling stake in every decision they made was living quietly in a modest house 20 minutes from their office. Eleanor had warned Daniel. "You need to come in," she told him on the phone. "There are decisions being made that require your presence. Not your signature, your presence." Daniel had put it off. He didn't enjoy confrontation. He never had. He was a builder, not a fighter. But then he received a document that changed his mind. Holt and 2 other board members were preparing to sell a significant portion of the company to an outside investment group. A group that Eleanor had investigated carefully. A group that had a history of buying companies and stripping them apart for profit. Meridian Capital, the company Daniel had built with borrowed money and late nights and Clara's quiet encouragement, was about to be sold out from under him. Daniel read the document twice. Then he put on his gray jacket, picked up his worn leather bag, and got on a bus to the city. He arrived at the lobby at 9 in the morning. The receptionist didn't recognize his name at first. That told Daniel everything he needed to know about how far things had drifted. He waited while she sorted through the visitor log, politely, without any sign of frustration. That was when Miranda Voss walked through the lobby. Miranda was the head of investor relations, sharp, quick, and fiercely loyal to Richard Holt. She noticed Daniel the way a cat notices something out of place. Her eyes traveled over his jacket, his bag, his shoes. She walked over with a practiced smile. "Excuse me, are you here for a delivery?" "No," Daniel said. "I'm here for the board meeting." Miranda's smile didn't waver but her eyes did. "The board meeting is restricted to senior executives and authorized personnel. Are you perhaps meeting someone downstairs?" "I'm meeting the board," Daniel said. "On the 34th floor." She looked at him for a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned to the receptionist and said, quietly but not quietly enough, "Call security and have someone escort him to the waiting area." She glanced back at Daniel with polite condescension. "Someone will come down and clarify things for you." Daniel nodded. "Thank you," he said. He sat down on one of the lobby chairs and waited. He had been waiting for years. A few more minutes was nothing. Security arrived in the form of a large, professional man named Gary who was perfectly polite and clearly uncomfortable. Gary explained that the 34th floor was restricted. Daniel listened carefully. He asked Gary one question: was there a way to confirm his identity with the front desk? Gary said he could try. He made a phone call. Something changed in Gary's expression halfway through the conversation. He lowered the phone slowly. "Sir," Gary said, "I'm going to need to ask you to follow me." "Not to the exit. To the elevator." Meanwhile, on the 34th floor, Richard Holt was already annoyed. Miranda had sent him a message about a confused older gentleman in the lobby who claimed to have a board meeting. Holt had barely glanced at it. He had a presentation to deliver. The investment group representatives were arriving at 11. He didn't see the message that Eleanor had sent to the board's secure server 40 minutes earlier. He didn't see it because he had never thought to check communications from Mercer's personal legal office. Nobody had. Because nobody remembered that Mercer had a personal legal office. The elevator doors opened on the 34th floor and Daniel stepped out. The hallway was bright and cold and very busy. 3 people passed him without a glance. He walked to the boardroom door and pushed it open. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something unexpected walks through the door. 12 people sat around the long table. Holt was at the head. Miranda was near the window. 2 outside representatives from the investment group sat together on the right side, looking mildly puzzled. Holt stood up slowly. "I don't know who let you in here," he said, his voice controlled but sharp, "but this is a closed session." Daniel said nothing. He walked to the table and set his leather bag down on the surface. He reached inside and produced a single document, clean, typed, bearing an official seal. He placed it on the table and slid it gently toward Holt. Holt picked it up. The room waited. Daniel watched Holt read. He watched the exact moment the words connected. It was a small moment, just a tightening around the eyes, a stillness in the jaw, but Daniel had learned to read people across 30 years of business, and he read that moment perfectly. Holt set the paper down. "This can't be current," he said. His voice had lost its edge. "Eleanor can confirm it," Daniel said. "She's available by phone if you'd like." Miranda reached across the table and picked up the document. She read the first paragraph. Then the second. Then she put it down and looked at Daniel as if she was seeing him for the first time. Because she was. The document was a formal declaration of ownership. Daniel James Mercer. Founder. Majority shareholder. Controlling interest, 63%. It was stamped, signed, witnessed, and dated. Not years ago, last week. Eleanor had prepared it specifically for this moment, because Daniel had asked her to. He had wanted something current, something undeniable. One of the investment representatives leaned over and read it quietly. Then he sat back in his chair and exchanged a look with his colleague that said everything without a single word. The proposed sale was over before it had officially started. Holt cleared his throat. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Daniel and began a careful, measured apology, the kind that sounds like an apology but is really a man trying to protect his position. Daniel listened. He let him finish. Miranda attempted her own version. Smoother, better practiced. She was very good at words. Daniel waited for her to finish too. Then he looked around the room quietly. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. Just with the kind of steady clarity that comes from knowing exactly who you are and exactly what you built. "I'm not here to remove anyone today," Daniel said. "I'm here to stop a sale that would have destroyed what this company stands for. Everything else, we can discuss properly, with attorneys present and the full board assembled." He picked up his leather bag. "I'd suggest we reschedule for Friday," he said. "My attorney will send the details." And he walked out. The lobby felt different when he crossed it the second time. The receptionist stood up slightly behind her desk. Gary the security guard gave him a respectful nod. Two junior executives near the coffee station watched him pass with expressions that were impossible to read and very easy to understand. Daniel pushed through the revolving door and stepped into the afternoon air. The city was loud and ordinary around him. Taxis. Pigeons. A man selling pretzels on the corner. The sky was gray and cold and perfectly familiar. He stood on the steps for a moment and breathed. He hadn't wanted this day. He had wanted to stay in his quiet house with his books and his Sunday visits to Clara's grave. He had wanted the world to keep spinning without needing anything from him. But some things you build don't let you walk away completely. Some things carry your name in their foundation even when your name isn't on the door. He flagged down a cab. On the ride home, he held his leather bag on his lap and looked out the window at the city Clara had always loved. She had never cared about the money or the building or the title. She had cared about what he was trying to make, something honest, something that lasted. He had almost let someone take that. He wouldn't again. That Friday, Daniel returned to Meridian Capital wearing the same gray jacket. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't hire a driver. He took the same bus and carried the same bag. Some things about him were never going to change, and he had stopped apologizing for that a long time ago. The board meeting was different this time. Attorneys were present. The full board was assembled. Eleanor sat beside Daniel and handled every legal point with quiet precision. By the end of the meeting, the proposed sale had been formally withdrawn. 2 board members who had been closely tied to the deal submitted their resignations before the week was out. Richard Holt remained, on a shorter leash, with clearer boundaries, and a much better understanding of who he worked for. Miranda Voss passed Daniel in the hallway on his way out. She stopped. She looked like she wanted to say something real, not the practiced version from the boardroom. But the words didn't quite come. She nodded once instead. Daniel nodded back. That was enough. On Sunday, he drove to Clara's grave the way he always did. He sat on a small bench near the oak trees and stayed a while. He didn't talk out loud. He never did. But somewhere in the silence, he said what he always said when things had gone the way they were supposed to go. You were right. I wasn't finished yet. He drove home in the quiet afternoon light, made a simple meal, and sat at the kitchen table where they had once spread papers across every surface and tried to build something worth believing in. They had. It was still there. And so was he.